Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. He slapped her, without knowing she was the owner's wife. A Friday afternoon like any other in the upscale Beverly Grove neighborhood of Los Angeles. Golden sunlight bathed the palm-lined avenues, where designer window displays vied with each other in simplicity and brilliance. It was the time when wealthy clients came to stroll after a business lunch, when electric limousines parked silently along the sidewalks, as clean as living rooms. At the heart of this polished setting was Hamilton and Graves, an iconic brand of understated luxury. Known for its rare items, customized Swiss watches, hand-sewn leather accessories, gem-encrusted pens, the store didn't just welcome shoppers, it cultivated a clientele, a select circle of insiders. Here, salespeople greeted only those they recognized, and stares turned heavy for those who stood out, even by a millimeter. Inside, everything evoked the elite, gray-veined Italian marble, crystal chandeliers suspended from the high ceiling, and soft classical music played through an almost imperceptible sound system. The air was scented with sandalwood and new leather. The meticulously lit display cases displayed the pieces like works of art. Nothing was left to chance. And it was into this sanctuary of privilege that Grace Washington entered that day. A black woman in her 40s, with coppery skin and a dignified bearing. Her cream dress, simple but tailored, hugged her figure without extravagance. No visible jewelry, except for a thin platinum wedding band. Flat shoes, clean, practical. And in her hand, a brown leather briefcase, worn but carefully maintained. She didn't fit the typical profile of the shop's clientele, at least not in the eyes of the staff. She wasn't looking at the windows. She wasn't loitering. She was walking with purpose, but without hurry. Her gaze swept the room calmly. There was something in her gait, that restraint in her posture, that silent assurance, that should have been enough to indicate that she wasn't a stranger. That she wasn't an intruder. But in a space where status was measured by the cut of a blazer or the logo on a bag, its discretion was perceived as an anomaly. In the corner of the shop, Brian Carter, the security guard on duty, had already spotted her. A former military man turned private security guard, Brian was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with a cold gaze. His navy blue shirt was impeccable, his badge clearly visible. He stood stiffly, arms crossed, as if guarding a perimeter to defend. When he saw Grace, he raised his chin slightly. He frowned. She didn't look like the clients he saw every day. Too plain. Too calm. And most importantly, he'd never seen her before. He watched for a few seconds. Then he glanced at the vendors, as if to check if they were about to intervene. But none seemed ready to move closer. So he did it himself. One step. Then another. Slow, controlled, but carrying a palpable tension. He didn't take his eyes off her. In his mind, this kind of vigilance was part of the job, spotting what was out of the norm, preventing incidents, keeping luxury safe. But he didn't yet know he was about to cross a line. Arriving 2 steps away from her, he stood in front of her, imposing. "Can I help you, madam?" the security guard asked, his voice flat, but his gaze betraying an instinctive distrust. The tone, more than a mere formality, had that cold edge that one reserves for those one already considers out of their place. Grace looked up at him calmly, her composure intact. Her face remained impassive, her voice soft but assured. "No, thank you. I'm expected." Brian raised an eyebrow slightly. The answer wasn't unusual, but in this context, a strange, black woman with no outward signs of wealth, it was enough to arouse his suspicions. He looked at her briefly, as if to force her to say more. "By whom?" insisted TL. "By my husband. He's already inside, in the offices." He narrowed his eyes, as if searching for a lie in her words. "Does your husband work here?" Grace looked at him silently for a split second. She understood exactly what he was getting at. He wasn't asking a question for clarity, but to set a barrier. A way of saying, "Prove to me that you have the right to be here." She replied calmly, but with a hint of controlled irony. Not exactly. This deliberate imprecision, this vagueness in the answer, had the effect of a spark on Brian's pride. He hated vague answers. And even more so coming from those he didn't consider legitimate. In his mind, she was probably lying. Perhaps to make herself look important. Perhaps to steal, even. The guard straightened up a little more, his chest puffed out with misplaced zeal. Madam, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This store is not open to the public without an appointment or invitation. It's a private establishment. The tone had hardened, slipping subtly from politeness to order. But Grace didn't back down. She stood tall, her shoulders relaxed, her features serene. Her posture wasn't arrogant or defiant, it was simply solid, accustomed to hardship, like a woman who no longer had to prove her worth. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just asking you to warn Mr. Anderson. He'll understand. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't try to justify herself. She didn't utter titles, didn't throw around names as threats, didn't brandish any privileges. She just used a name, soberly, Mr. Anderson. More Brian, he was adamant. He no longer saw a woman calmly asking for someone to be called. He saw a stranger who refused to obey. And in his narrow mind, this disobedience was taking on unacceptable proportions. His tone became harsher, more aggressive. The tension in the air became palpable. I asked you politely, now that's enough, he said through gritted teeth. Grace, still upright, didn't respond. She simply crossed her arms, anchored in her dignity. A tense silence fell. The salespeople, already uncomfortable, pretended to be busy. But glances shifted, ears pricked. Two elegant customers at the back of the room paused their conversation. A blonde saleswoman, visibly stressed, took 2 steps back, her gaze flickering between Grace and the security guard. Brian's voice, this time, snapped. Get out. Now. Before I take you out myself. He leaned toward her, threatening. His breath was short. His jaw was tense. His authority was wavering, and he felt that this woman, without raising her voice, without even moving, was slipping away from him. But Grace did not tremble. His gaze, calm but deep, fixed itself on the guards. His voice, calm, resonated with quiet power. I advise you not to lay a hand on me. There was a hesitation in the air. A moment of possible retreat. But Brian was already too far gone, too proud, too stubborn to turn back. In a fit of anger, or personal humiliation disguised as authority, he abruptly raised his hand. And, in a burst of pure amazement, he slapped her. A sharp, almost surreal crack ripped through the shop, shattering the luxurious calm like a shattered window. Grace's body swiveled slightly from the impact, her hair briefly flying to one side. An icy breath blew through the room. Everyone's gaze was frozen. Time seemed to stand still. The blonde saleswoman put a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide. One of the customers exclaimed in a low voice, "What the hell is going on?" But Grace didn't waver. She remained standing. Her cheek throbbed. A sharp, burning pain pulsed against her skin. But her gaze didn't waver. She breathed deeply, fighting the shock, the tears that threatened to well up, not of pain, but of rage, of injustice, of memory. She slowly raised her face. Her gaze had hardened. Silent. Unwavering. Then, without a word, she calmly opened her bag and took out her phone. Her fingers barely trembled. She pressed a favorite contact. The line rang. She put the phone to her ear and said simply, in an almost icy whisper, "Call Charles." The security guard stared at her, unsure what to make of it. He still thought he had the upper hand. He still thought he was in the right. But already, the balance had just shifted. Because behind this first name, behind this restrained voice, hid a storm that he would never have anticipated. A few minutes later, while the shop lobby was still frozen in a heavy silence, the large glass doors suddenly opened, letting in a breath of warm air from the boulevard. A black car, a Bentley Continental Flying Spur, screeched to a halt just outside the entrance. The rear door opened immediately, and a man stepped out confidently, his step sharp, precise, and controlled like a blade. He was black, tall, and straight, like a ceremonial officer in his 40s. His midnight blue three-piece suit was tailored to the millimeter. A Patek Philippe watch subtly peeked out of the sleeve. His shoes, polished to perfection, made no noise on the marble. But it was neither his suit nor his watch that commanded silence in the shop. It was his presence. Magnetic. Authoritative. Undeniable. Charles Anderson, founder and CEO of Anderson Holdings, had just joined. Some of the salespeople recognized him immediately. One of them, who had previously hesitated to intervene in the altercation, instantly turned pale. An executive assistant took a step back, visibly on the verge of panic. Charles didn't slow down. His dark eyes searched the room with a sharp intensity. Then he saw Grace, standing there, still dignified, despite the marked blush on her cheek. His face froze. "My God, Grace. What happened?" He strode across the room and stopped in front of her, his hands outstretched as if to touch her without hurting her. But she said nothing. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She only looked up at him, and in that look he read pain, but also immense control, a contained storm. Then, without a word, she indicated with a slight movement of her head the man still standing behind her, the security guard. Charles turned slowly. He was now staring at Brian Carter, who had gone as stiff as a statue. The confidence he had had a few minutes earlier had evaporated, replaced by an icy tension. Charles's gaze was as sharp as a scalpel. "What is your name?" His voice was neither shrill nor theatrical. It was low, gravelly, and all the more formidable for it. Brian swallowed, taken aback by the suddenness of the scene, and replied. "Brian Carter, sir. I'm just enforcing safety rules." Charles didn't even blink. "The safety rules?" He walked forward with slow, almost solemn steps. He spoke softly, but each word was a cold slap. "You got your hands on me, wife." A murmur spread through the store like a silent shockwave. The salespeople, who had previously kept their distance, began to approach, drawn by the CEO's tone, like spectators caught in the act of truth. The atmosphere had become heavy, almost suffocating. Everyone felt that this was no longer a simple altercation, it was a moment of social truth, a tear in the smooth walls of luxury. Charles Anderson stepped forward, turned to Brian, and said in a firm but icy voice. "You just slapped Grace Anderson, that my wife of 12 years. He left a silence. Then added with surgical precision. "She is also vice president of the supervisory board of this group. This group that owns this store, and every person here owes them respect, as much as they do me." Brian Carter's face literally fell. He took a half step back without realizing it. His gaze went from Charles to Grace, then to the security cameras, then to the salespeople staring at him with a mixture of shock and disgust. I didn't know. She didn't say. I had no way of." But Charles cut him off sharply. He didn't raise his voice, and yet his voice dominated everything. "She has not no obligation to tell you who she is. None." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "She doesn't have to justify his presence. Not here. Not in a building that belongs to me. Do you understand what this means, Mr. Carter?" Brian tried to open his mouth, but no words came out. His uniform, which had given him a semblance of authority just minutes earlier, now seemed too big for him, almost ridiculous. At that moment, the store manager, a thin man in a beige suit, came running in, clearly alerted by the commotion. His face was ashen, his eyes wide as he saw Charles and Grace standing there, the security guard standing nearby. He approached with visible nervousness. "Mr. Anderson. I'm sorry, I wasn't informed of." Charles raised a hand. "Calm. Sharp. Not now. I don't want excuses or justifications. He stared straight into the director's eyes. I want him to be raised immediately off his duties. He must no longer have access to no establishment of our group. Neither today, nor tomorrow. Nor ever. The director nodded, his breath coming out short. Yes, sir. It will be done. Charles continued, without looking away. And I want a official memo sent to all our brands, in all states. No employee is allowed to lay hands on a customer, under no circumstances. And especially not on a member of my family. A respectful silence followed. The order was clear. Final. Without appeal. 2 black-suited headquarters security officers arrived at the same time, led by a panicked assistant. One of them approached Brian and placed a hand on his arm. Please follow us. Brian didn't resist. He said nothing. He didn't even dare look around. He knew. He felt it was all over. His career. His facade of authority. Everything. The security cameras had caught it all. And some of the customers too. He was escorted out. Without a word. A customer whispered. He thought she was nobody. And yet, she was the backbone of the empire he claimed to protect. The next morning, the digital world woke up to a new viral video. It didn't come from a celebrity or a political scandal, but from a simple customer of the shop, Hamilton and Graves, a direct witness to what he saw as a shameful injustice followed by a spectacular turnaround. In the blurry but poignant video, we first heard tense voices. Then a clear sound, a slap. A muffled scream. The breathlessness of those watching. And then, the entrance of a man in a suit, majestic, determined, like a king entering his own kingdom. You just slapped Grace Anderson, my wife of 12 years. The phrase resonated in the video like a sentence. And on social media, this phrase became a mantra. The caption posted by the witness? He humiliated and slapped her, without knowing that she was the owner's wife. The video was first shared by a few activist accounts, pages promoting awareness of systemic racism. Then it was picked up by celebrities. Journalists. Influencers. In less than 6 hours, it had surpassed 3 million views. Grace's face, dignified despite the slap, made headlines on many accounts. Charles Anderson's impassive and implacable image has been compared to a rare image of justice, a powerful black man who acts with calm, authority and class. Reactions were pouring in everywhere. Small orange diamond, yet more proof that racial profiling exists, even in the most exclusive places. Small orange diamond, she wasn't wearing any luxury brands, so they thought she was nobody. That's the true face of some security guards. Small orange diamond, finally, an ending where dignity triumphs. And where power belongs to those we never suspect. Calls to boycott the Hamilton and Graves channel were automatically launched, but very quickly, internet users corrected the error. The shop happens to belong to the husband of the woman who was assaulted. He's already fired the security guard and ordered a national memo. That's what you call responsiveness. The Anderson Holdings conglomerate released an official statement at noon, signed by Charles Anderson himself. We strongly condemn any discriminatory behavior within our stores. No uniform, no badge, justifies violence. Our stores are places of service, not judgment. Starting today, a new training policy will be implemented to ensure that the dignity of every person is respected, regardless of their appearance. Mainstream media picked up the story. CNN, MSNBC, NPR, The World Africa, France 24, all devoted a segment to the scandal that had become a symbol. Television sets debated at length. If even the owner's wife gets slapped in her own shop, what about the others? This case is a modern parable. A lesson about social perception, silent prejudice, and invisible power. And at the heart of it all, Grace Anderson refused to give interviews. She declined all invitations. She sought neither revenge nor glory. She let the images speak. She let the world see. And for once, the world listened. Because deep down, it wasn't just a story of a slap. It was the story of a society that judges first, and sometimes learns, too late, who it has just slapped.